Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
10 to 6 Friday evening, Tom Swarbrick here on LBC means, ladies and gentlemen, one thing: cutting through the fog of political spin from one side of the Atlantic to the other. Sit back, relax, he'll take it from here. It's Simon Mark's American Week.
Tom, regular listeners may remember that a few weeks ago I thought we had passed the point where America was no longer a democracy. At the time, President Trump was ignoring Congress and defying court orders, and he's only continued down that very dangerous path ever since. This week, we crossed a new Rubicon, the point at which Trump's America may well have become a police state. All week long, we have seen running battles in small pockets of Los Angeles between some of the protesters demonstrating against the president's mass deportations and thousands of police and troops, not just the LAPD, but also hundreds of US Marines and members of the California National Guard deployed by President Trump, overriding the objections of California's elected leaders. The first time that has happened in America since 1965.
We're watching live pictures here. This is from Los Angeles, outside a Metropolitan Detention Center, where over the course of the last 2 hours, we've seen the size of the federal forces there grow.
We have seen this front line of soldiers from the National Guard. They are carrying sticks. They are carrying their standard issue M4 rifles. It does look like they have magazines on them, which suggests that they are carrying ammunition.
Oh my God, we have tear gas, we have fireworks going off, tear gas is in the air, people are dispersing. I can't see anything.
CNN and KCAL-TV in Los Angeles with video of scenes that pro-Trump propaganda outlets used to create the impression that the entire city was burning. Now, certainly, a small area was disrupted by significant acts of appalling violence. Cars were set ablaze. Police were pelted with rocks and bricks. Some rioters stood on a bridge overlooking a freeway and dropped cinder blocks onto police cars as they passed below. And many protesters waved Mexican flags, images that President Trump seized upon to insist that the country was facing a foreign invasion.
These people are agitators, they're paid, they're professionals. They're insurrectionists, they're troublemakers, they're all of those things.
But of all those things, the most important descriptive he used there was insurrectionists. He chose that word deliberately, stoking fears that he may soon invoke the 1807 Insurrection Act and use it as a pretext for deploying US troops on the streets of any town or city where protests against his mass deportations take place. And remember, the Army and the Marine Corps are supposed to be used to fight real foreign enemies of the United States, not protesters, many of whom are American, and simply oppose Trump's authoritarianism. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, in a primetime address to the state, made it clear that Trump is determined to escalate a situation that his White House has already inflamed.
California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived. There are no longer any checks and balances. Congress is nowhere to be found. The rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don.
Even Don doesn't make very many bones about that, having conveniently forgotten that his own supporters engaged in a real act of insurrection when they stormed the Capitol building on January the 6th, 2021 and tried to overturn an election. Here he is last Sunday on an airfield's tarmac, making it clear that he will be the sole arbiter of when and where forces are deployed.
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere.
What's the bar for sending Marines?
The bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order.
It is important to underscore that even as the protests have continued in Los Angeles and spread to San Francisco, Dallas, Chicago, New York and elsewhere, the ICE raids on immigrants have intensified, fueling fury about a president who refuses to give detainees the due legal process that the law requires.
Oh my God!
In Nebraska this week, where masked government agents descended on meat-packing plants and supermarkets, protesters tried to block law enforcement vehicles that were driving detainees away. Some clambered onto the bonnet of one car and could easily have been killed as the driver used aggressive tactics to try and force them off it. On the streets of New York City late last month, a 33-year-old tourist from Chile was dragged off the streets by mistake. She was visiting with her 12-year-old daughter, who stood on the pavement watching in tears.
Officer, this is her daughter.
Wait a minute. Jesus.
Get off, guys.
Also in New York and in many other parts of the country, ICE agents are now detaining migrants when they show up for routine court hearings. The court buildings themselves, supposedly the epicenter of justice, being turned into stalking grounds for Trump's mass deportation maw. And most shockingly of all yesterday, in California, the arrest of a US senator. It was the clearest evidence yet that Trump's willingness to disrespect the other branches of government knows no bounds.
As our law enforcement officers have been assaulted, they've been pelted with rocks and bricks.
As the President's Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, was holding a press conference in Los Angeles, Senator Alex Padilla attempted to challenge the claims she was making about the government's determination to uphold the Constitution. The moment he started speaking, security swept in.
I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the Secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals.
He was manhandled out of the room while Ms. Noem did not bat an eyelid. The senator was then forced onto the ground, handcuffed and led away. Scenes from a banana republic playing out in Los Angeles.
If this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers out in the Los Angeles community and throughout the country.
Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., there were other images earlier this week indicative of the president's desire to take the country down a fully authoritarian path. Hundreds of Abrams tanks, howitzers and Bradley fighting vehicles arrived in the centre of the city aboard a train that had brought them all the way from Texas. They will be the centrepiece of tomorrow's massive military parade in Washington, a $45 million affair ostensibly to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the US Army's formation. But quite by chance, the date also falls on President Trump's 79th birthday. His message to protesters planning to descend on the event:
if there's any protest that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. This is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force.
The country is a powder keg, but after the events of last night, so is the Middle East. Israel's decision to launch go-it-alone attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities, killing the head of the country's Revolutionary Guard, several top nuclear scientists, and at least one senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader, threatens to draw the United States into a regional war. It also shows that even Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now acts first and worries about what Donald Trump might say later. He may even have viewed the president's comments earlier this week about the difficulties the US was encountering negotiating with the Iranians.
If they don't make a deal, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
If they do make a deal, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon too. It would be nicer to do it without warfare, without people dying.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer to do it. But I don't think I see the same level of enthusiasm for them to make a deal.
He spoke there to the New York Post. The Americans were warned about Israel's attack ahead of time, but say they offered no military support. On social media this morning, the president indicated that he still wants to keep negotiations with Tehran going, noting that he had given them a 60-day ultimatum to strike a deal. Today is day 61, he wrote. Finally, at the end of a long week when our attention was largely focused on Southern California, came news that kept our attention fixed there.
I love the colorful clothes you wear and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair.
The death of Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys was announced on Wednesday. He was 82. He was the leader and main songwriter from the moment of the band's creation in 1961. As an 18th birthday present, he was given a reel-to-reel tape recorder on which he learnt how to overdub, a practice that led him to create the soundtrack for the Southern California of the 1960s. As the New York Times put it, cars, sex and rolling waves were the only cares. Music journalist Annie Zaleski told LBC's Andrew Marr that Wilson was a musical genius.
When you look at his melody, his gift for harmonies, composition, he just heard music in a different way than everybody else.
He did indeed, which is why Bob Dylan once suggested that Brian Wilson should gift his ear to the Smithsonian Museum. At the end of a week of only bad vibrations from Los Angeles, the music of the Beach Boys can still give us all hope, Tom, that one day simpler and sunnier days will return.
I'm picking up a few vibrations. She's giving me the excitations.
From Washington, D.C., Cy Marks, American Week.